Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a show today. Today isn't going to be, it's not a show that I actually prepared for because, as you know, right now, Texas, specifically where we're at, Kingwood, Texas, is flooding. Houston is flooding. Well, a lot of parts of it, that is. Mostly on the eastern side, northeastern side, going down south. Beaumont, Texas, flooding. Winnie is going through hell. You know, and today we're going to talk about that. So what I'm going to do is first just kind of introduce the show. And folks, if you want to give us a call at 646-716-5812, whether you're in the affected area or not, 646-716-5812. But what I want to do is tie a lot of the climate stuff that we're going through right now with our political reality. And let's make it fun. Let's make it educational and fun. I'd love to hear from anybody, whether affected or not, and your thoughts of what's going on. 646-716-5812. The title of the show today, like I said, I didn't really write anything up, but what I did do is say, let's just have a preamble. So I called it, Texas Floods Not an Act of God, but Ideology and Willful Disregard of Science. And the reason I gave it that title was based on something that a friend sent me earlier today. I like to always sort of compose the thought, my thoughts on real people, events, and what people are saying, what people are talking, because that is the way I think we relate with people, not from here, but from here. In other words, what we always want to do is to make sure that we have the frame of reference from us as opposed to the frame of reference from me to many or whatever. It's never about one person. It's always about us. So I like to hear what people have to say. I love to hear what people have to say. Anyway, subtitle is Texas, Houston, Kingwood are flooded again. Many friends have just recovered from Harvey and are flooded again. Again, friends. I know them intimately, friends that have been flooded in Houston and beyond. And, you know, today I got a notice on Facebook from one that said, hey, they're 2 inches away from my home. The water's 2 inches away from coming in, which probably means some of it's going to wash in. But he said, but our other friend didn't fare as well. Our other friend who spent hundreds of thousands didn't fare as well. Our other friends who spent tens of thousands didn't fare that well. They are flooded again. And who bears the costs? We're not only talking about the costs that the insurance companies, the ones that are going to have to perform on, but what they're going through in the stress. That's going to take time. That's going to take effort. That's going to put them in a stressful condition, in an ill condition. I mean, and it never really had to be. And that is what's so hurtful about all of this. These things are things that creep up on you that's been in the making for decades, you know, and, you know, we try to change it in real time as we, you know, those of us who are activists, those of us who do things, we really try to inform in such a manner that when we're telling folks we need to do X, Y, and Z, people just don't think that, well, you want to control my life. No, we want to make life good for everybody. So, I mean, it's disconcerting that so many of us are going through that right now. So for those of you that are having a hard time right now, my heart goes out to you. Know that, you know, whatever personally I can do. I wrote a piece, not a piece, I wrote a little rant on Facebook where I said, I'm officially pissed and need to rant. But I do not like to write in this state, so I will wait before I post a longer prose. But, when policy devastates people's lives, it's hard to be silent. The corporate political crookedness responsible for the successive floods in Houston area and beyond are a direct result of believing and acquiescing to the crap from evil corporations, their willfully enslaved wards, and their purchased politicians. And I really mean this. And when I say I mean those words, I'm not trying to say those words weren't for hyperbole. And let me repeat that. The corporate political crookedness responsible for the successive floods in the Houston area and beyond are a direct result of us believing and acquiescing to the crap from evil corporations, their willfully enslaved wards, and their purchased politicians. I mean that. I now have friends that will go through a rebuilding process yet again in less than 2 years for no fault of their own. For no fault of their own, they will go through this. No fault of their own. So, I mean, when you hear this, when you see this, if it doesn't touch you on a visceral level, who are you? This is not rocket science. It is simple volumetric math. You know, I mean, I got some messages that sort of expanded on what I've said from several of my followers on Facebook. I mean, I had an intelligent young man that gave some history on particularly Houston, but I bet that could apply in many places. But anyhow, continuing, one of the things that I said, when one person gave the idea, well, I'm not sure exactly if that is what he was saying or not, but he kind of gave the impression like, well, you know, God, you know, this is an act of God or whatever. You know, and I beg to differ. This is no act of God. I mean, yeah, a volcano exploding is an act of God. An earthquake created because you're pressurizing the earth in the middle of Hard Rock, Texas, that's not an act of God. That's an act of man. We are having earthquakes throughout these areas that we're mining petrocarbons. Homes are being rocked off their rockers because of the high pressure wastewater we're putting into the ground. And when the earth shifts and cause that, these companies try to absolve blame, places that never had earthquakes before. That is easier to calculate. That is easier to quantify, right? But what about this climate? What about what's happening? What about these storms that are getting worse? People say, oh, well, you know, there have been bad storms before. Don't forget, what is it, Lisa in Galveston that wiped out everybody in Galveston? That was a bad storm. Yeah, but we used to talk in terms of these types of flooding 500-year events, and you can actually scientifically give a reason why they occur in those kinds of period of time. We can talk about cumulative accumulation of weather in certain parts. I mean, there are a lot of scientific reasons. I mean, a lot of it beyond the scope of my knowledge, given that I'm not a climatologist, I'm an engineer. There are a lot of things beyond that scope that one can go through, right? But what we are seeing here, there's evidence. I want to show you, well, let me just read this portion to get the program started. Texas, Houston, Kingwood, flooding again. Flooding again. And you know what? I better bring up the chat. Sorry about that, guys. If you're chatting, let me go ahead and bring the chat stream up so I can bring in both YouTube and Facebook onto one stream. Let me also get over to the page where I have my peeps. So bear with me, folks, if as I bring that up one more time. Bear with me 1 second. I'm coming back to the show as I clean up here on Facebook and on YouTube Live and elsewhere. But you know, there was a time when we really looked at this. Let's do something here real quick and bear with me. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's be frank, right? We can actually. What is going on here? What is going? Bear with us, folks. I'm sorry. Technical problems. Okay, I think that is solved now. Okay, that is solved now. All right, that is solved now. Okay, So, going back to the terms, going back to where we're at, there are times that there are things that we know sometimes are, we cannot quantify easily, but we know. There are things that are not always very quantifiable. Michael Dean Newton, welcome aboard. In UK, flooding has gotten worse over the past 4 years. It's only gotten worse next year here. Bruce, swimming in but above water and A-okay. I'm glad that you're okay, Bruce. And by the way, back here, we're okay, close to your place. The bayou has started to recede. So I think one more time, River Chase has dodged, well, a large part of River Chase has dodged the bullet. I've seen some pictures where the people that are down in the lower ends of River Chase, the water may have gotten to them. But so far, it seems like most of River Chase themselves, River Chase itself, is fine. Anyhow, continuing with the program, one of the things I then said is, these are not acts of God. This is the cumulative action of what man has done to the environment and where they have encouraged people to live. This is just physics playing out. Sadly, those responsible for the problem would like one to see it as an unlucky act of God. This is no act of God. This is science. It is not, it is science. Every oil company's scientist has climate modeled. They have modeled this perfectly. Don't sit down there and think, oh, this is some accident. No, their scientists have modeled it, and that model has gone to researchers, what you call marketers and all these kind of guys to create a message not to mess with their product. So let's not sit back here and think, oh, there are some innocents. And when I speak about how some of these corporations are, I am just being some crazy lefty that hates democracy or hates corporations, or not in the least. I love good corporations. I think there is a place for private enterprise and there's a place for the commons. But we have to know where to put them, and we also have to make sure that they're doing their job, and we also have to make sure that they're doing no harm. There are court documents. They know exactly what is happening. That is why I do not mince words when I say and refer to them as evil. I mean, evil. If you are causing all this mass damage around the world, how else can you claim it? You know, when you can sit down in an executive office, nice and air-conditioned and ready, as what you're producing evokes, I mean, hell on earth to many. But you're okay. All the money that you've extracted from everybody else, you can go ahead and use and get a fortified home that is on, even if you're on the beaches on stilts, that nothing can ever happen to it and so forth. You can afford to buy those things. But just to show that this isn't some kind of left-wing thing, I want to show you something here, right? Take a look at this. You know, whenever, let me take that little piece off of there so that I don't block everything. Union of Concerned Scientists, Science for a Healthy Planet and Safer World. Holding major fossil fuel companies accountable for nearly 40 years of climate deception and harm. They knew about global warming and did worse than nothing. They did worse than nothing. And that is the definition. That is, in fact, the definition of evil. If you have somebody who knows, and you know what? Nobody was asking these companies 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when they discovered that there were problems, right? That they needed to make a change like that's going to disrupt completely an economy or whatever. Because look, burning wood is a climate. I mean, although that is, when you burn wood, as long as you're regrowing it, that is sort of a cycle, right? That's a carbon cycle. So burning wood and then growing the wood and burning it again and growing the wood and burning it again is a zero-sum gain, right? In other words, you're not affecting climate change over time because the carbon that you're throwing into the air comes back, and as you grow plants, it grows back. But what we have with fossil fuels, we have the sequestration of all these carbon elements, the animals and plants, for hundreds of millions of years, that's been placed in the ground over time. And what we are doing is spilling all that carbon into the air, right, at a much faster rate than they decayed out of the air when they're in their formative states, right? There's nothing that says that because there's carbon in the ground, it has to be burnt. There's fossil fuel that we have to use it. We could always use regenerative energies. And, you know, we can. Now, when people talk about, well, you know what? I should go ahead and read something from that first, because I think that is more important. Michael D. Newton, okay, I got that message out already. I should read something from that document. It says, holding fossil fuel companies accountable for nearly 40 years. And it says, major fossil fuel companies have known for decades that their products, oil, natural gas, and coal, cause global warming. Their own scientists told them so more than 30 years ago. In response, they decided to deceive shareholders, politicians, and the public, you, about the facts and risks of global warming. They didn't deceive shareholders. They didn't deceive politicians. I mean, these are not dumb people. These guys and that invest in shares, they do their research, and they know exactly what's going on. So, I mean, this article, I understand when you say the oil companies deceive, but it's not a zero-sum game. This is something where there is complicity between shareholders, politicians, and executives of these corporations, as well as these politicians. There is a complicity, ignorance, or rather willful ignorance. If you're working and you know what's going on, and you're not at the same time working to make things better. Look, like I said, I'm not saying that what we should do is, oh my God, oil is bad, get rid of oil. We couldn't. That's not a logical answer. We know that. But what is an evil answer is to try to stump mitigation going forward in the future. In other words, are you going to stop research on batteries because you know in the long run it means the fossil fuel industry is dead? Or are you going to start to try to create laws that says you cannot, every house cannot generate its own electricity, must be hooked on to the utility companies because these utility companies want to do, I mean, there are so many laws out there that actually hamper people who want to do better for the environment. There are some places you cannot put, and this has nothing to do with aesthetics or anything like that. They don't allow you to have your own electricity. They don't allow you to be off the grid. And when you ask why, they try to give some sort of a fudgy answer, right? But the reality is these companies want to maximize as much as they can. Remember, that's what our system teaches, right? Our system teaches that whatever product you create, you maximize the holy hell out of it, and anything that is coming to reduce the type of profits you can make on that product, you squash if you have the ability to do so. That's what our system says, and that's what the corporations do. Have you ever thought why the state of batteries is as lousy as it is right now? Batteries? Why is battery technology so behind, or is it? You know, that all falls into the climate. That all falls into this whole entire domain. So, folks, telephone number 646-716-5812, 646-716-5812, if you would like to add anything or say anything whatsoever. Let's see. Andy Valdez says constitutional carry in effect. I don't know if I understand what that says. Bruce says, okay, this is interesting. Okay, let's see. Bruce says we just have to wait million years and the sun and the sun will sequester it. Then we can find a way to live and not be so energy intensive. Okay, Bruce. I know what you're saying. Andy Valadez says, constitutional carry in effect? I'm not sure. Now, Michael Dean Newton, remember, I can't play the video on YouTube that you put there. I haven't taken a look at it, and it would be responsible of me to just go ahead and play it. I could, but play this video on air, not knowing what the copyrights are and all that good stuff. So, I mean, if you want to tell me something about what's in the video that you posted with a smile, let me know what's in the video, and I'll be more than happy to talk about it, or, you know, just say whatever you had to say about it. But bear with, let's see, 2-minute demo. Okay, I'm not going to read that one. That one shouldn't be read on air. Okay, let's continue. But anyhow, let me continue with some of the information from this fossil fuel dossier. It says, in response, they decided to deceive their shareholders, politicians, and the public, you, about the facts and risk of global warming. They repeatedly fought efforts to move the country away from fossil fuels. They slowed progress on the most important challenge of our time, and some continue to spread disinformation and obstruct climate policies even today, all while being aware of the role their products play in climate impacts. These companies should immediately stop funding climate deception. They should bear their fair share of responsibility for the damage caused by their products. I love that. Let me give an example of that, right? You're paying $2 and you know, people always talk about the market. The market is self-regulating, as if we have a market that is self-regulatable. We don't. Because theoretically speaking, scientists know that fossil fuel throw carbon in the air creates global warming. We could create some numerical portion of what we could create some sort of a delta of a storm, and the differences in storms and the damage it creates. And then theoretically speaking, all this damage that has been created by the storms, we could bill to the oil companies. And after we bill to the oil companies would be forced to increase the cost of gas so that it really reflects its cost, right? In other words, you're paying $2. Let's say you're paying $2.25 for gas right now. That isn't really the cost, right? Because by people burning gas, there are a lot of other costs associated with it. The cost of additional storms that come in and create damage, the cost of the sulfur dioxide, not sulfur dioxide, well, actually from the refineries, the sulfur dioxide that gets into the air that kills people, that gives them cancer, that gives them all kind of respiratory illness. Somebody had to pay that for that stuff. The cost, we have Cancer Alley in areas where we have all these refineries. That is a cost. So if all those costs created by the use of this product were billed to the people who created the product, right? Then what would happen is when you buy gas wouldn't be $2.25 a gallon. Gas may cost $12 a gallon. And when gas costs $12 a gallon, somehow now put in solar panels on every single rooftop starts to make sense, because the area, the cross-sectional area that we have on the top of buildings throughout the country, throughout the world, can generate so much electricity that we could reduce the dependency on fossil fuels by orders of magnitude, right? I mean, look, when I tell you people, the technology is there. The rules that are needed to effect the technology is what's missing. And nobody wants to talk about it, because for those who believe in capitalism, in the market system, a true free market would handle that, right? Because here's how the real true free market would work. Okay, you go into the ground, you dig for oil, you get some of those methanes that get thrown into the air from the process of doing oil. We know that the methane is going to create some amount of damage to the atmosphere. We create a cost for that damage, and we bill the people who get the oil. That increases that price, right? We burn oil. We go ahead and we distill the crude into the different materials. And in that process, you put benzene in the soil and you put all kinds of crap in the air, there's a cost to that, right? People who get sick from having those things there, we bill that to the people, to the refineries, right? That increased refinery cost. Okay, now people burn the gas in the car, right? We can handle that two ways, right? We can either say we bill the supplier of the gas in the to go ahead and sell that gas. In other words, if you're selling the gas, we know that however many pounds of carbon that are thrown in the air, it costs X amount of dollars. The oil company pays it. Of course, you could also say the person who ultimately burned the gas could pay it. Anyway, we're going to pay it, right? We either pay it when we buy the gas or we pay it as a tax. I think it makes more sense to pay it when you buy the gas, which means that the oil company pays that bill. A true market, a true self-correcting market. For those of you who do economics, a lot of folks, a lot of right-wingers like to come on my show and say, you must not understand economics. And it's like, oh no, actually, I quite understand economics pretty well. Economics is a lot easier, trust me. It's a lot easier than using def-EQ or in all these kind of equations we had to do in engineering. Economics is a drop, you know, no problem. And if anybody who follows what market economics tells you, you know, in other words, what we do today, would see how easy it would be to turn this thing around. It is easy. Much easier than people would even imagine, because at this point we are making it what it's really supposed to be: self-regulating, but we don't really have that right now. Michael D. Newton says they're talking about inventing carbon removal systems. We already have them called. Yeah, you're right. Trees are a great carbon removal. You know, we just have to turn the Sahara back into a forest, right? Turn the Sahara, right? Because the Sahara had to be a forest and filled with animals and all that kind of stuff at one time. I mean, otherwise, how did the oil get there unless the tectonic plates moved to the Sahara, taking along oil from some other part of the world? Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't quite study geology. Okay, Lee Grant says, seems there's no problem that we can't tax our way out of it. Yeah, Lee, I mean, look, taxing our way out of it, tax is a penalty to some extent or a cost. Yeah, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I mean, there's a cost, and that cost is a payment, and calling that payment a tax is, you know, it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. Do you, Lee, have a problem with that? If you do, I'd love to hear what it is, because what I think I'm saying is quite fair. I don't think there's anything there's anything unfair about what I'm saying. What I think is unfair is what oil companies are doing right now. Oil companies pay very high salaries to executives, fairly high salaries to the workers in refineries if they can fight hard enough to get it. Of course, right now, refineries are trying to use a whole lot of contractors, which is another way to just give most of the spoils all the way up the top as the contractors. You know, I've protested with quite a few workers from Exxon, from Shell, and all these guys in the past years to understand how these oil companies are trying to milk every last dollar for just a few. So I understand quite what's going on there, Lee. But yeah, I think yeah, that is what we need to do. We need to do that, and I think we need to do that sooner rather than later. Let me go ahead and get back to our thing here to see what we got to do. All right. Anyhow, folks, anybody in the area, man, that would be good to get somebody to call in and tell me what are they seeing, if they're seeing anything, if they have access to the phone, that is. 646-716-5812. Love to hear from you. 646-716-5812. Going back onto the cost, a lot of people don't quite understand what we're talking about, simply because much of this isn't explained in this fashion when we're talking about change or global warming and all these things, right? But I want to go back to one of the issues that that one of the persons said here. Let me pull that up. Well, I want to read a Facebook comment. This one kind of got to me, and I would love for this guy to call in. I'll read it, and if he's listening, he'll know who he is. He says, how come when climate change skeptics, which I am not, I do believe the planet is heating and man is at least partially responsible for, point at weather events, they are told that weather is that weather is not climate. But when climate change alarmists point to weather events, it's proof of climate change. Ah, I need to explain that to you, sir. Weather is an incident within climate, okay? So when you get a hurricane or you get something like that, that is one particular event. You cannot use one particular event to say this is climate change, which encompasses the entire climatic system of the earth, right? So you can't quite say that. So while the converse is not true, the traverse is. In other words, I can say that the reason hurricanes are this bad is because of climate change. But one bad hurricane does not make climate change. I hope that kind of makes that a little bit clearer. And somebody complained about me talking about floods in Houston. And my response to that was, Houston is one of those laissez-faire cities, right? We don't have zoning. What we do have is, what do you call those things? Neighborhood treaties, neighborhood contracts, deed restrictions, okay? Deed restrictions, very much enforced in Texas, because, rich people, when they build their homes, they want to make sure they can keep out a set of people. So deed restrictions are strong here. But zoning, no. And the reason they don't want zoning is we can go put a refinery in some poor neighborhood that has an empty lot and somebody's willing to sell it to us. We can throw it there. No zoning. But what protects the neighborhood, the rich neighborhoods who can get a contract put together, is a deed restriction. All right. I responded to that guy who said, Houston will always flood. I said, of course, but we can build accordingly, zone accordingly, create infrastructure accordingly. As I said, it's science. The Netherlands, a people who have learned a bit about the commons, lives on water quite successfully. Our incapacity to do so is ideological and, to put it bluntly, a lot of times ignorant. That is something that we have to really be cognizant of. Lee Grant, I don't see that you responded to that issue that we spoke about taxes. I would love to hear what your response is when we talk about taxes, because I think it is, people have to understand for real. It's not, we don't just say these things for the sake of saying them. Yeah, we need to tax, right now we need to tax all this flooding that's occurring. We should be taxing the oil companies for. All the sicknesses in Cancer Alley, we should be taxing the oil companies for. Then what would they have to do? Of course, that would mean they'll have to reduce the salaries of the overpaid president and the overpaid vice president and the overpaid everybody else. But you know what? Don't you think that is long overdue? Don't you think that is something that needs to be taken care of? I'm going to go ahead in a little bit and read a little bit more about that, the deception, if you will, the deception of these companies. Because I think unless people kind of get a feel for that, understand what's going on there, it is never quite what one thinks. So we're going to go there. Let me go ahead and find that document. And I will be, let's see, sometimes you're looking for these things, and it's right in front of you, and you can't see it. So let's go here. There we go. All right. Climate accountability. The Climate Accountability Scorecard is an in-depth analysis of 8 leading fossil fuel companies, ranks them on the order of climate change actions. I know the other day, the person who owns, I think it's the Shell Corporation, the CEO of the Shell Corporation, finally acknowledged that climate change is real, and he gave the impression like his company was going to do something about it. You know, I mean, I don't hold any water to that, nor do I believe it. I'll believe anything when I see it, that they do something. But anyhow, for nearly 3 decades, many of the world's largest, let's see, I want to do an update here. It says, the climate deception dossiers. Containing 85 internal memos, more than 330 pages, 7 dossiers reveal a range of deceptive tactics deployed by the fossil fuel industry. These include forged letters to Congress, secret funding of a supposedly independent scientist, the creation of fake grassroots organizations. I think that is the most obscene thing. You know, I mean, that's partially what folks did with Russia, what Russia did with several black organizations. They created these four activists and brought people together. Hey, yeah, let's support Trump, or let's not vote. It works if you let it. Multiple efforts to deliberate, manufacture uncertainty about climate science and more. The documents clearly show that fossil fuel companies have intentionally spread climate disinformation for decades. Fossil fuel company leaders knew that their products were harmful to people and the planet, but still chose to actively deceive the public and deny its harm, and the campaign of deception continues today. The fundamentals of global warming have been well established for generations. Fossil fuel companies have almost certainly been aware of the underlying climate change as early as 1977. Representatives from major fossil fuel companies attended dozens of congressional hearings in which the contribution of carbon emissions to the greenhouse effect was discussed. By 1981, at least one company, Exxon, was already considering the climate implication of a large fossil fuel extraction project. So they had that in mind. In 1988, the issue moved beyond the scientific community and onto the national stage. James Hansen, a leading NASA climate scientist, testified before Congress that scientific data had confirmed that industrial activities were causing climate change. It was also in 1988 that the United Nations formed the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the U.S. Congress introduced the National Energy Policy Act in an effort to reduce emission of heat and traffic gases. It is difficult to imagine that executives, lobbyists, and scientists at major fossil companies were by this time unaware of the robust scientific evidence of the risk associated with the continued burning of their product. Indeed, one of the key documents highlighted in the deception dossier is a 1995 internal memo written by a team headed by a Mobil Corporation scientist and distributed to many major fossil fuel companies. The internal report warned unequivocally that burning the company's products was causing climate change and that the relevant science is well established and cannot be denied. How did fossil fuel companies respond? They embarked on a series of campaigns to deliberately deceive the public about the realities of climate change and block any action that might curb carbon emissions. The results: more than half of all industrial carbon emissions have been released since 1988, and there is no comprehensive U.S. federal policy to address the problem. I mean, I don't know how else to define evil. I don't know, you know, we always talk about harming people, right? That is willfully harming people. How do you mitigate that? How do you, how do you, what do you do? In my case, I know what you do, right? The thing about it is there the political will to do it? I know what you have to do. You could say, for those of you who believe in the market, we could make the market work. We could those of you who believe that the market is a good thing, there are fundamental ways to allow the market to clean this stuff up. I don't believe in the market way to clean it up, because the market way to clean it up still means that somebody's going to make a hell of a lot of profit off of the misery of many. I think enough profit was made on the misery of many. But if we left this up, oh my God, I can't believe that. Oh my God, I hope that's not true. I hear Kingwood High School, the major school in our area, was flooded with several feet of water. And I'm reading now that they say they hear that Kingwood High School has water inside it. Don't know the extent though. People that are around here. Now, do you get it? Those of you that are supporting these politicians who fill the airwaves and fill you up with those emails with hot air, do you get it? Do you get what these people are doing to you? Do you understand what these companies, what these corporations have unleashed? Do you really get it? Are you ready to do something about it? Are you willing to do something about it? I know a whole lot of folks here depend on the industry, but you know what? You still... Look, at some point in time, the break is going to have to be made. And people just think it's going to be fine after this flood is over. We're going to clean up. And Kingwood and Texas and all these places that flooded will be beautiful again. They will be beautiful again. They will be beautiful again. And they will be beautiful again for a few months. And then this comes again and you work to clean up and unwater your home. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for that kind of a cycle? Is it too late to mitigate that cycle? Not really. I mean, the cycle in Houston is probably cooked. We're probably, you know, a friend of mine who flooded, I said something and I don't think they appreciate it too well. Because right after the flood, I said, you know, this is going to happen again and again. And you know, over here, they're fixing the gates on the dam that holds back the lake around here and all that good stuff. Well, you know, what they did today was old technology. They dropped the lake level because they knew a lot of rain was coming. So they dropped this lake and they dropped the lake on top of this one by quite a few feet because they know it was coming. But you know, you never know exactly what kind of rain event you're going to have. I remember there was a rain event several years ago where the system just sat on top of Houston for several days. And I mean, just about everywhere flooded, right? And people say, oh, that happens all the time. Yeah, but it's getting worse. This is something that happened every 50 years or so, starting to happen every year, right? So, I mean, this is kind of cooked. But what I was trying to illustrate to the friend was there are other factors other than there is climate change. That's a major portion of the amount, the volumetric, the volume of water that's in the air over us in this time of the year. Science, again, the warming effect. So I said, you know, that was likely to happen again. But there are other reasons, well, and it comes from just a regular person said it on Facebook, you know, and they said, she said, I don't understand. I drive through Kingwood, and they are building in a lot of those areas that had all those trees and swamps and every time this happened and you said there's new flooding that occurs and nothing happens, and the reason why is, like I tell you, you know, they build inexpensive homes that are, well, rather, let's back up. They build expensive homes inexpensively on an expensive land that floods. They charge a hell of a lot for a home that's beautiful, but that will flood. I mean, maybe they thought it would have been a 10-year event. You know, every 10 years it flood. Okay, in 10 years you forget. But Harvey was 2 years ago. That is where Houston was decimated. We had a minor event in May where in this neighborhood, a whole lot of folks were in feet of water. This one, they said, oh, that was caused by construction. Okay. People still flooded. I think it had more to do than construction, right? But anyhow, so there are a lot of factors here, and all of the factors go back to exactly what I said was the issue I really spoke about in the thing, where I said, but I do not like to, but when policy devastates people's lives, it's hard to be silent. The corporate political crookedness responsible for the successive floods in the Houston area and beyond, meaning all over this country, are a direct result of believing and acquiescing to the crap from evil corporations, their willfully enslaved wards, and their purchased politicians. Take it to the bank. Take that to the bank. And when you are ready to make a change, and when you're ready to be really free, you know what I mean? I remember listening to all my Tea Party brothers and sisters. Oh, don't tread on me. That was the word. Don't tread on me. I want my freedom. What freedom? You've given your freedom up. You've given your freedom to the corporations. And I know a lot of people say, oh, that's a broken record. You're always talking about this in a corporation, that in a corporation, this. It's true. You know, it is true. You've given your freedom away. You've given your freedom away to two groups. To the corporation as an entity and to the wards of the corporations, who are the ones that have taken your freedom away and who themselves are slaves to the entity. And how do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate that? You mitigate that one policy at a time. One policy at a time. One policy at a time. And you know what we as activists have? Policies in galore. Notice what I talk about taxing? That is one of the biggest weapons we have right now in policy. In paying for policy, in mitigating what has been going on correctly. Right price things. Right price things. The price of gasoline is not $2.25 a gallon. It is likely more like $10, $12 a gallon. Take that money and pay for the damage created by the use of that product. To do that, we have to have the will, right? People are going to say, well, look, if I got to go to work every day, how am I going to pay $12 a gallon for gas or whatever? First of all, we don't do that immediately. We start doing these mitigating factors incrementally. And what that's going to do? Incrementally, that's going to start people taking seriously efficient fuel standards. They'll start taking it seriously electric cars. They'll start taking seriously, instead of burning natural, they'll start taking seriously, oh, guess what? Since the government is collecting all these taxes, we can now subsidize solar cells on everybody's home. And guess what that does? Everybody's home have solar cells. A lot of their energy, a lot of the money that come out of their pockets to pay a corporation no longer comes. So the freedom, if you want the freedom that we're talking about, if you really want freedom, I can give you freedom. I can give you freedom. Subsidize solar cells. Put the solar cells on your home. Do all these things. And suddenly all these monies that you used to pay to corporations for gasoline, no, you don't have to anymore, because you got an electric car, you have solar cells that will charge up. You don't pay as much to the utility company. That's more money in your pocket. And we can show where real democracy, really democratizing energy, really works. And not only that, but the reason there's nobody pushing that is it decentralizes the distribution of energy. It decentralizes all of this. And if all of this is decentralized, that corporate estate that controls you, that enslaves you, no longer has power. You own your means of production. You own, a group of you own your, that is freedom. That is freedom. But there's nobody teaching Americans what freedom really looks like. Freedom looks like solar cells on your roof. Freedom looks like you're driving an electric car. Freedom looks like you're paying $12 a gallon for gas, but when you go to the doctor, you don't have to pay a cent because it is incentivized by those who caused your illness. Freedom looks like those folks who have manipulated our economic system to enrich themselves, who now have to pay back 2% per year on their assets, means that your life becomes easier, means that you can go to school and educate yourself more so. Freedom. That is real freedom. What we have now is corporate slavery. But nobody tells you that. Nobody wants to tell you that. You know why? They don't want to tell you that because you disempower the few and you empower the many. No longer are you tethered to the master. I got to show up at work. I got to do X, Y, Z. You see? It's how you look at things. It's what freedom really looks like. Okay, let me get back to folks here. Michael D. Newton, I think I took that already. Lee Grant, seems there is no problem that we can't tax away. Yes, I agree with that. Daniel, 100% true. Daniel S. Indeed, they have a Gadsden flag and a Blue Lives sticker on the same car. You're right, and some could have many windmills. It's so windy in their area. Just to accept just the concept of lawn is a waste of good garden space. Indeed, that decentralization of their extractive capitalism scheme scares the hell out of them. Daniel S., you get it. Indeed. That's true. Yes, that's owning your own means of production indeed. People, you are indoctrinated into belief that you are powerless. You are indoctrinated into believing that there is some mythical center. You are indoctrinated into believing that somehow you need to have that corporate master. You are indoctrinated into believe that you cannot do it on your own. Look, I'm using a microphone. Somebody invented this microphone and mass produced it, and now it's cheap. We need good companies that can do that, and we have them. But after they've been commoditized, why don't we return to the time when corporations served their purpose? A corporation used to come into existence for a period of time, and then it became out of existence. It was a group of people coming together to accomplish a task, and when that task was complete, the corporation was dissolved. That's what we really need. And anything that requires a permanent corporation is government. If something needs a permanent corporation, then it should be controlled by we, the people. Now, you want to have your sandwich shop, your masonry shop, your shoe shop, all these things that create products, perfecto. You own it, you make the profit from it, you employ people, all of that is fine. But things like energy, that need these big corporations, inherently, what do you think these guys, you know, let me tell you. What people never tell you about these corporations that have to make a profit, right? The deep sea horizon would have never occurred if they didn't have to save some monies for their corporate shareholders and pay an excessive amount of money to their executives. Wouldn't be there because they wouldn't have done those. They wouldn't have had a stupid thing like not realizing that that crystallization would occur on carbon under that amount of pressure underneath the ocean coming out from 14,000 feet or deeper below. You see? There are a lot of things that, you know, that belongs in the commons because you don't have to worry about satisfying the shareholders who don't care about science. He just wants or she just wants to have the money at the end of the day. That's all they want, the money at the end of the day. Then if you just want the money at the end of the day, you should not be in something that requires thought, that requires much. It's that simple. Think about it. So folks, if you really, really, really want freedom, start thinking the progressive way and start thinking about some of these things that I'm telling you about. from the solarization of everybody's home, everybody who has a house. If you're living in an apartment and the apartment has those things on it, I mean, there are so many ways to really effect freedom. But they don't want to define it that way. What they'll try to define it is, oh, you are a communist, a socialist, because you want freedom. They don't tell you right now that you're enslaved. They don't want to tell you that. There is more similarity between the corporation and slavery than between Medicare for all and communism. Dr. Richard Wolff came on my show, and better than I could explain, he told you exactly why the corporate state is a slave state, just with a little bit of class and less ownership. The slaves had to be taken care of. In other words, nobody wanted a sick slave, so they had to keep that slave healthy because that slave was a means of production. The corporation, you get sick, throw you away and get the other person. Actually, it's a lot more effective than slavery. And maybe that's the only reason slavery died. I really would love for people to do some more deep thinking. And I'm talking about in a manner that everybody understands. Sometimes I am not the best explainer. I try to be. Sometimes I depend on the people who listen, who watch. And the next day I'll come back with a better explanation because you guys, some of you are so much better. But that's what it's all about. We're coming to the end of the show. Let me read the last two things. Yes, combined with Medicare for all, the people would be less shackled. Absolutely. Daniel also said, indeed, we have somehow succumbed to the idea that relinquishing the commons to the corporations was a good idea, and it's the worst idea ever. Thank you very much, Daniel. You're absolutely right. Relinquishing the commons, let's explain what the commons are. The commons are public things that should be owned by the public. That's what the commons are. Things that not should be, things that are owned by the public. Parks, the commons. Oil should be the commons, but somehow it never becomes the commons. Either the person who owns the land has mineral rights, or the corporations who drills it for the government pays a pittance in taxes and takes all the spoils to a few. You're right, they can prove that, that the carbon in CO2 and CH4, which is the methane in the atmosphere, came from fossil fuels because it is depleted of certain isomers, which would indicate that it had to come from fossil fuels. So true. So true. So we can prove that, and we can quantify that to some extent broadly and tax the corporations for that product that's left in the air. That's all we have to do. We are wage campesinos, labor Zeeks. I like that, wage campesinos. Campesinos is the Spanish word for, what is it? How do I say campesinos in English? It is like the campesinos. How do you say campesinos in English? It's that country boy kind of a deal. The guy who works the land, you know? Anyhow, we're at the end of the show. And for people in Kingwood, Texas that are going through the flood, all my thoughts to you. I'm so sorry it's happening. Remember what I said, a lot of what's happening has been caused, we have been complicit in a lot of what's happening. Let's start going forward from today. Stop the complicity. Let's start electing people who are going to listen to what we're saying. Let's elect people who are going to give us real freedom instead of faux freedom, F-A-U-X freedom. Let's really elect people that really trust what we're saying, because that is the only way we're going to make it. Folks, if we don't do that, we're toast. Real quickly, folks, remember this is a call-in show and also a show that requires your support. Please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Subscribe to our show. It's very inexpensive, and you will be doing a good thing. You'll be making sure that people learn a whole lot of stuff they would otherwise know, or refreshing them on some of these issues. So I ask you to please become a member, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. right. We're going to close this baby out now. I thank you kindly for being a part of the show. I thank you kindly for those of you who listen. I ask you to please share. That is how we actually get the message out. When we share, we ensure that people hear an alternative point of view. Today's alternative point of view is let's start looking for real freedom. Let's really start looking for real freedom. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know exactly how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.